Welcome to Faith Talks Wood Podcast. I'm Will from Flat Woodworks.
And I'm Tom from Mountain Valley Maker.
And we're a podcast that talks about everything from Jesus to joinery and a little bit of everything in between. When we moved from Tennessee to Pennsylvania, back home, one of the things we were excited to get away from was tornadoes. We thought, man, this can be nice to not have to deal with tornadoes anymore. And, well, guess what we had today, Tom?
A tornado.
We had a tornado. And so I work in Erie, Pennsylvania. I live 45 minutes south of Erie. And it was right towards the end of the day. It was right at just after 5 o'clock. Everybody's phone starts going off. And we have two buildings where the headquarters is at for my company. And they're next to each other, but they're not connected because there's a building in between that wouldn't sell to us. That's a long story. But so I'm at the other building over at the HR department talking with them about some projects, and all of our phones go off and it's like tornado warning, get in the basement, blah, 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 take shelter, whatever. I've been through this a million times. We lived in Tennessee. There's tornadoes all the time. I'm like, interesting. Everybody's starting to kind of freak out. And so I walk back outside, back over to my building. Everybody's like, yeah, get in the basement. And I got my phone and I'm like, it's like 15 miles south of us. Like, it's not going to hit us. But nonetheless, crazy weather today. And, I don't know. I thought we got away from that. And being in the beginning of June, it usually isn't here, that kind of weather. But the weather's weird here. We've had cold days down in the 40s and back up to the 80s the next day. It's just been wild, which is probably what caused tornado weather, I'm sure. But yeah, actually, funny enough, 40 years ago on May 30th or May 31st, there's a whole string of tornadoes that went through western Pennsylvania, and a couple of F4 and F5s. One of them took out the whole town of Albion, Pennsylvania, which is just like 10 minutes north of where I live. And so that was just the 40-year anniversary in 1985 is when that happened. So yeah, we do have a history of tornadoes, but in my 34 years of life, I can count on one hand the amount of tornadoes that I've seen in Pennsylvania. Now I can count on one hand the amount of tornadoes I've been around in a couple of years in Tennessee. But so now, did you ever deal with that in North Carolina or anything? Or
oh yeah,
you got
yeah. So ironically, the night that I flew home from basic training and Hurricane Hugo came through. But every time you have a hurricane, you get spin-offs of tornadoes. And a tornado went through our town and just obliterated part of Presbyterian College campus.
Oh, wow.
And and when I was growing up, a friend of mine's house their house was kind of up on a hill, and we're in the flatlands I'd say the low country of South Carolina, approaching where you get up into the hills, go toward the mountain. But their house was up on a hill. Their house got literally picked up by a tornado. The only thing left was the foundation. Their house and everything they're on was like 3 miles away. It's crazy. And and back in North Carolina, we had a series of tornadoes that came through, and dude, it wiped out neighborhoods. It literally ripped the roof off of Lowe's, like the whole entire commercial building. Like, it was crazy. I've not experienced tornadoes here in Colorado where I live, but ironically, this past weekend was a 2-day concert we go to every year called Night Vision. And they have 5 artists on Friday, 5 artists on Saturday. And this year, on Friday night, the headliner was Jeremy Camp. And he's one of my favorite artists. I've never seen him live. I wanted to go, but because of work and then money, and I saw the weather forecast. I had not already purchased my tickets for me and my daughter because my daughter was volunteering for the Special Olympics And so she was like, I'm going to be late. I'll miss half the concert each day. And so we had debated back and forth. And I was like, you know what? We're just not going to go. Dude, I am glad I did not. So we had a storm come through. Here on my farm, we got a tremendous amount of rain. But where the venue is, where they have night vision, dude, they had 1/4-inch size hail. Like the whole entire ground was covered. It looked like it had snowed. They got so much hail. And the first 2 artists played. The rest of it, they had to cancel that night. And one of the guys on the tech team at my church that I served with, he was there. And I was like, dude, like, were you able to get shelter? He's like, I turned my lawn chair over top me. You're allowed to take chairs in. And I was just doing my best to hide up. And he said you could still feel it. But he showed me pictures of the hail. I was like, man, I am glad I did not buy tickets for that concert.
Yeah, the only crazy weather like that I've been through, obviously being where I'm from, the snow. I mean, we had over Thanksgiving, after Thanksgiving here in Pennsylvania, I don't know, 4 or 5 feet of snow. But in Tennessee, I don't remember what year it was. It was like, I think we were still in the first house, maybe 4 years or 5 years ago. And but that tornado that went through Nashville, and it took out whole neighborhoods. And that was about, 40 minutes north of us. And we had a couple that came towards our house. There's probably 3 or 4 times where we had to like, okay, we better bunker down because this thing might turn this way kind of thing. That's pretty surreal. I'm the kind of guy that I want to be on the front porch. I want to watch it. Like, it doesn't scare me. Like, I don't know. I just like, I have this like awe. I would chase a tornado. I always tell people, you won't find me dead on a roller coaster, but I will chase a tornado.
Yeah.
It's like a different thrill. I don't understand it, but yeah, so we see some of that. Now, one of the craziest weather things that I've seen that just for me was wild, because coming from up north, I never seen it. After we bought our first house in Tennessee, I don't know, about 6 months later, it rained, but the rain, there was a wall. You could walk and be in sunshine and take one step to the other way, and you'd be in a pouring down rain. I'd never experienced that before. It's not like that up here. It's so gloomy up here that when it rains in the whole area, and there's not much of a differentiator. You're literally a flat wall of rain, almost like it was coming off of a waterfall. And you'd step back, and you wouldn't be in the rain, you'd be in the sunshine, and you take a step in, and you'd be getting drenched. It was the wildest thing.
Yep. Seen that many times in the Carolinas.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just, I don't know what it is about. Maybe it's the South kind of thing, or the way that, I don't know. But I thought that my wife was laughing because I was outside jumping back and forth like a kid. But yeah, good stuff. Weather is crazy, and it just reminds you of the power of God.
Yes.
And, you think about the story when the disciples are on the boat and Jesus is sleeping, and the storm and the waves and everything's coming, and they're scared, so they wake him up. And then he wakes up and rebukes the waves and the storm, and it calms down and goes, he's like, why are you guys afraid? And they're like, oh man, homeboy just told the waves to calm down. That's the Will International version. But yeah, it just puts a reverence and awe of God, just how powerful he is, how great he is, and how awesome he is for the creation, right?
Yep.
All the stuff that happens, and it's all part of his creation. So,
yep.
Anywho, well, I just want to thank the patrons that support us on Patreon. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you'd like to support the podcast, if the podcast has blessed you and you feel like you want to support it, you can do so at patreon.com/faithtalkswood. And we really appreciate all you guys over there that support us. Also, I want to say thank you to Surf Prep Sanding. Go to surfprepsanding.com, use code FAITH at checkout. You'll get 10% off. Helps the podcast out a little bit, and you're supporting a great company. And then also just want to say, pray for the podcast. Podcast continues to grow. We want to continue to spread the gospel and the hope of Jesus outside of just our normal base. So we'd love to to have you joining us with prayers. So without further ado, Tom, who's our guest today?
Yeah, man. A while back, and it's been quite some time. I can't remember the first time I saw Travis on Instagram, but saw something he was making, and had to click on his page, and there it said that he was a follower of Jesus. And I was like, man, we got to get this guy on the podcast. And so I reached out to him and got him on. I'm excited. He also likes doing scroll saw art, so excited to have him on. But Travis Wood, Almond Creek Woodshop, man, welcome to the podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Welcome, sir.
Yeah. For first, I want to say thanks for having this podcast, because I've been catching up on a lot of the back podcasts, and I think I learned so much about my journey just from listening to other people's journey. So just want to give you guys a thank you on that. So, but yeah, name's Travis, and follower of Christ. I didn't grow up in a church, but I think I always believed in God and Jesus. But I grew up in a little town in central Michigan, and probably about 300 people in the town, about another 600 out on the outskirts. So small town living in central Michigan. But I'm married to my beautiful wife, Stacy, and we have 5 kids all together. We're a blended family. And she had 3 and I had 1 when we got married, and we had a 5th one to just top it off. And I ended up adopting her 3 kids later on. So they all carry my name, and well, almost all of them. One I got one married, but I got 2 beautiful grandkids from that adoption too. So, but yeah, but
That's awesome. Is your last name actually Wood?
Yeah, it's Wood. Yeah.
Okay. I like it.
Perfect for the hobby. Yeah. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I guess my faith walk, like I said, I didn't grow up in the church, but we did a lot of watching, of Robert Schuller, the Crystal Cathedral guy, and 700 Club. So that kind of gave me a base of God and Jesus. You know, I didn't understand Christianity so much, but I thought I always believed in God, always believed in Jesus. But I carried that on to kind of my adult life. Once I graduated, I did what I thought everybody should do: leave your small town to a bigger small town and get married. And that's what I did. And I didn't get my really first church experience until I was in my mid 20s. I lived in a town called Almond, which is about 30 minutes from where I live right now. But I had a friend stop in, and he was in a church basketball league, and they were looking to get more people on the league. So he asked me to come to open gym, which I did. And there was one guy playing with us. I went with my team, and there's one guy on another team who was kind of playing hard for gym class, if you know what I mean. He was doing some smack talking, and I was like, who is this guy? Well, we get done playing. Well, that guy comes up to me and goes, "Hi, I'm Pastor Dan." I'm like, "Oh, okay." He's the pastor. I'm like, okay. He's like, "If you want to be on my church league, I run it with a bunch of local churches. All you have to do is go to church. It doesn't have to be mine, just has to be a Christian church." So my wife at the time and I decided to go to this church. And for not having really, I've been in a church before, but without having that really church experience, it was like a perfect setting. There was only 60 or 70 people. And this guy had just a passion for Christ. And it's the first time I really seen that. And he'd tell a story how he didn't grow up in the church either. He grew up in kind of rough side of Saginaw, and just God eventually called him, and he went into ministry. And I mean, he's just so powerful in his sermons. And I'm sitting there, it's like he's speaking to me, and I've never experienced that before. And I just was soaking it all in. And I bought my first Bible, which I can't read now because the letter is too small, but bought my first Bible and started praying more. And it was a great experience. The only thing, it just didn't last as long as I wanted to. After about 6 months, we moved away, and it just didn't work out going to that church. It was just too far away. And I wanted to continue going to church. But we couldn't agree on a church. There's probably more story behind that, but don't get into, but we just didn't find a church to go to. But to me, the fire was lit inside me, and I still kind of pursued reading the Bible. I didn't understand the Bible so much. I kind of needed a Bible study at the time, but I continued to pray, which unfortunately, the marriage I was in, it didn't take long, and it just started spiraling. And I ended up getting divorced after a certain time. And it was then I just kind of took a hard evaluation of my life. There's no better time after you've been divorced is to evaluate your life. But I kind of realized I was just taking too many other people's advice on things. And if you get to a point where I was like, I didn't feel like I was living the life I wanted to. And I even come up to a phrase I used to use is be wrong on your own terms. So when I'd make a decision, if, it was my decision. If it's wrong, it's my decision. And I kind of applied that to Christianity and the Bible and following God. I decided, like, if it's wrong for me to follow God and Jesus and go to church, it's my wrong. Because I did feel like I was steered away from going to church at times, and I let people influence me from pursuing God. And so that's where I really started investigating the Bible more and just diving into the Word more and more. And I found a couple churches. I was bouncing in out of some churches, but I really took a good jump when I moved back to my small town, and that's where I met Stacy. And like we was talking before, she had 3 kids, I had 1, and I think we more or less joined forces. We both were in a kind of a similar spots in our life where we were good people, but life was throwing some curveballs. But we decided, we knew of each other, kind of a small town thing, everybody. And she's one, I joke with her, she's one where she's related to everybody. So I tell her she had to marry me because there's nobody else she wasn't related to. So process of elimination. But we decided to get married, and we had a really good conversation because we realized what we were up against. We're blending a family, and there's so much to that. And we had a good sit down to just talk about just everything from discipline to, taking accountability over our past marriages that failed. And we got to the point where Stacy asked me, where was God in my previous marriage? And she grew up in a church, so religion was very important to her. And she asked me that question. I'm like, boy, I don't know where God was in my previous marriage. I didn't feel like it was there. And I asked her, I says, well, was God in your marriage too? And she's like, we went to church, but I don't know. And right then we made what I consider one of the most important covenants of our marriage is we just said, God's going to be the center of our marriage. We messed up our previous marriages. This one, God's going to be. That seemed like it was the common denominator. So we promised that God was going to be the center of our marriage. And we both kind of at the same time agreed we want to be a family that goes to church. We felt that was important for the kids and important to us. And what that did is kind of put the spotlight on me, because she asked me, it's like, well, you're not baptized. Don't you think you should get baptized? And she even asked me, so why are you not baptized? And for me, there's a lot of reasons. Part, not feeling worthy. Part, not understanding the baptism completely. And, but the church was going to, I was really close to the assistant pastor. So she encouraged me to go talk with him. And after about half hour talking to him, he's like, dude, you're ready. It's almost why haven't you got baptized? You're pretty much ready. And so we did an altar call, and I went up front of the church and basically confessed that I'm giving Jesus Christ, committing to Jesus Christ as my Savior. And but I got baptized, and it was a really good thing because all the kids were there. I felt, here I am. We're joining this family, and I'm supposed to be the spiritual leader, and I have no idea how to do it. I'm not gonna. I still don't know for sure, but I felt like that was the best way to make that step as a spiritual leader, of just showing the kids, okay, I'm getting baptized. This is important. And it was really cool. And I felt it solidified us as a family. It just got things rolling. And if you're blending a family, you better have God on your side for sure. But for the most part, after that, we brought in the fifth member of our crew with our birth of our daughter, and for the most part, things were growing pretty good with blending a family, going to church. And I remember the assistant pastor told me, when you make that commitment to Christ, it doesn't mean all your problems go away. In fact, you may have more problems because of that. And I didn't understand what he exactly meant, but I would get tested. And a little over a year after I got baptized, I would get one of the biggest tests as a Christian that would challenge basically my commitment. It would challenge our covenant. And so the church we was going to, like, we're going as a family. Everything's going good. We're blending our family as best you can. And I thought things were going pretty good. The church we was going to, the pastor ended up leaving for another job. So the assistant pastor moves into that new role as senior pastor. Unbeknownst to me, it started a kind of a rift in that church. Not everybody agreed with that. And it started out small, and it just kind of built steam. And before long, from the top down, from the elders to the deacons, you can feel that split in that church happening. And it got to the point where you go to church, you can feel that tension, and you can feel like something's not right there. And someone, bless their heart, I think they was trying to heal the church. They suggested we have a congregational meeting where everybody can basically air their differences and we can move on and heal. That went as well as expected. It's kind of like a big time wrestling cage match it ended up being. So we have our basically our service, and after the service went down to the congregational meeting, and like I said, it was rough. And Stacey and I are sitting back because we're a new family. We're just like, we're trying to stay out of it, and we're just sitting there watching this, and it was really tough to watch for me. Because I seen people that I was looking up to and looking to as spiritual leaders, just not, to me, act like in a Christian way. And a lot of people were just saying a lot of things. It was rough. And Stacey and I ended up leaving that meeting, and I think we're both in shock, just to see that. And this is a church she grew up in, so it was really tough on her. But we come home and really talk about it, and throughout the day, it just was sitting with me harder and harder. And I just was getting more and more angry. I didn't understand what I seen. And I finally stopped and just prayed to God. I was like, what was this? What did I just see here? What is this Christianity? And I was like, and part of the problem is like, I agonized over not being baptized, not being a Christian, going to church. And I was really struggling with that meeting. And Stacy and I finally that night decided to sit down and just kind of talk about it. And I remember we get to a certain point and I just emotionally just dump. And I stopped and it's like, I don't care if I ever walk into a church again. It better be a wedding or a funeral and it better be related to them. But I don't care if I ever walk into a church again. And this is where having a spiritual partner not only supports you, but holds you accountable. Because Stacy didn't skip a beat. And she turned to me and says, "You can't say that." And I'm like, "Why not?" Watch me. She's like, "We made a promise that God was going to be in our marriage and that we were going to go to church. So you have to figure out how to get over this." And I had nothing to say to that. I just kind of rolled over in my bed and went, "Yeah, she's right." And I decided to get over this. I just needed to be between me and God. And that week I ended up just opening up the Bible. And I remember just reading, I think it's Matthew, where it says, "Knock and a door will open and seek you will find." I remember reading that in the Gospels year before, and I didn't understand it, but I sat down and prayed to God. It's like, "Okay, God, I'm knocking. I'm knocking hard here. I'm seeking, because my bags are packed." But I understood, I need to figure out for my family to get over this. And, I just prayed to God to, show it to me. And I opened up the Bible and like I said, I had no clue where to find any answers, but I just started thumbing through and I got to Psalms. And I read through Psalms. I got to Psalms 118. Went to 8 and 9, which is, "It's better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in humanity. And it's better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in nobles." And that was just stopped me in my tracks. Because I realized one of my problems wasn't so much the content of that meeting. It was watching people that I put my focus on. It was seeking validation and seeking their acceptance. And I realized my focus was on man instead of God and Jesus. And that was like an awakening, and to just, and I think some of your podcasts, you guys talked about, where you focus around trying to please people and what it does to you. And boy, that was just awakening for me. Well, not just what was wrong with that meeting, but what was wrong with me, I guess, in my pursuit, because I was seeking that validation. I was seeking that acceptance. And it's not where you need your focus on. And even my understanding of Christianity, that's like, well, that's basic Christianity. Your focus needs to be God and Jesus, and everything just rolls after it. And that was kind of my way of getting over that. And it talks, I think it's Hebrews, where it talks about casting off what burdens you. And when I got to that point, boy, it just felt like I just cast off a big burden on me, because now I don't have to seek acceptance from man. I just got to keep my focus on God and Jesus. And you guys have, your last podcast was Preachers and Stinkers. And I when you guys, I was listening to that, it's like, man, you guys saw me coming, because another you talked about Romans and Romans 5, talking about perseverance and talking about, getting through something hard, and which seems like a punishment, but it's not, but it gives you that character. And that really, like I said, that moment solidified me as a Christian. And I feel like I became a better leader, a better follower of Christ, and a better Christian. from getting through that. And Stacy and I, we had a lot of storms over the last 21 years, but I always go back to just getting over that moment and persevering through that. That led to, getting through health issues with the kids, watching, up until the time I adopted the kids, seeing their dad leave their lives, that was tough to watch. But even then, when it presented to me to adopt, it wasn't even a question. It's like, okay, God, I know what you want me to do. And, we did it, and it's, but yeah, that's, I could go on and on what that, that moment did. And even going back and healing from that, I look at that church, we ended up splitting, of course. There's no healing after that meeting, but I always look at that church as being a good church that went through a bad moment. And they had to persevere through some things too, from that split. So, but yeah, it's, so like a faith, my faith walk, it's not without bumps, but I think having God as that center, I don't know if it'd survive, honestly, and I don't know where I'd be if, Stacy didn't hold me accountable, for that. So yeah, that's
good stuff.
Yeah.
Three things. One, I've been through a church split.
Yep.
It's not easy.
No.
Some of the people that you look up to and you really have your hope, not your hope in, but like they've mentored you and that you've seen them, and then this happens and you see the worst of people. It's a really, really tough thing to go through. And persevering through that is hard because then you question God, like, God, is this really your plan?
Yeah, exactly.
Have a bunch of people like, so yeah, that's one thing. And so in church, I'm teaching our Sunday school, our adult Sunday school. We're going through the book of Galatians line by line. And we just went Galatians 2, 11 through 14. Paul, right? He talks about rebuking Peter because Peter is hanging out with Gentiles. And as soon as the guys from Jerusalem show up, Peter's like, I don't know these guys. I don't know these Gentiles, because he wanted to impress, and he was trying to impress those who were still holding on to some of the Jewish customs and stuff like that. And Paul has to rebuke him. And it's the thought of the reality of like, man, why do we try to impress man? Why do we try to, look up to man? Because you're right. The ultimate is God. And so that's, it's funny how that keeps coming back. That keeps coming back, right? It's like,
it does. And,
God's not done with it.
I try not to give the devil power. I'm not when the devil made me do it or the devil's at work. But it caught me. I think you had Drew Witt on. He was talking about the same thing a while ago. I think it was a previous podcast, but he was talking about, what he went through. And I think you had a similar thing. And I was like thinking, what better way for the devil to focus off God and Jesus and to kind of tempt us to just try to, please people. And, basically it's a quiet way of really, it disrupts your whole, I guess, Christian thought, but like you said, you end up looking at man and man's going to be, I tell people, I'm going to let you down. If you look at me as a spiritual leader, eventually I might let you down, and,
right.
And that same thing, you look at guys that are mentors and you see them stumble. And even I talk to the younger guys, what's the biggest thing they say? It's there's a bunch of hypocrites in church. He goes, right. Exactly. We all are. Don't let anybody think they're not, it's
right.
like.
But there's nothing wrong with having spiritual mentors, people that you can look up to. I mean, I still today have a couple guys that are, older than me, and I look up to them because, but to your point, the thing about those guys are, one in particular I can think of right now, is that he would tell me, just know I'm going to let you down. because the reality is that God is constant, God is perfect, and man is not. Like we're gonna fall short. And so now, you guys are involved in a church now?
Yeah, we went with a split. We were at a church for a while. Then when most of our kids graduated, we started going to a church in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, called Thrive.
Okay.
And lately, this year we've been doing a little bit more online than physical being there. But yeah, that's.
I'd encourage you to go.
What's that?
I would encourage you to go. Hebrews talks about don't forsake meeting together.
Yeah.
But
and that's what we actually was talking about this not too long ago. It's like we've been getting it's been too easy to do online. But we were pretty involved in a church before, and Stacy was doing the Sunday school, and she was really heavy in that. And we ended up leaving that church and going to Thrive. And I think it's been a good break to not to be so involved, but it's something we've been talking. It's like we got to start. Like I said, it's easy to sit back and watch online, and it's being physically there. It's a big difference.
Oh, absolutely.
Being physically there, and so.
Now, what denomination would Thrive fall under?
It'd be non-denominational. So,
yeah.
And when we met, the church we were going to was considered Abrahamic faith.
Abrahamic faith.
It's a Church of God. So.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So, but I think they're kind of on a different spectrum of, I guess, Catholic, just some of their beliefs and stuff like that. So
I've never Abrahamic faith. I'll look that up. I never heard of that one before.
That's what I was told. So
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. And Tom, you have any questions for him?
No, I just I would reiterate the same thing, is that we don't need to put people on a pedestal. The only person that's perfect is Jesus, and it's just a bunch of imperfect people in the church. And I get so tired of, particularly like on YouTube and Instagram, there's just all these people they could find any reason at all to insult. I was watching a YouTube, had a nice thumbnail. It was intriguing, made me click on it, and it was talking about different This lady was literally insulting every pastor on the planet, just about Matt Chandler to include, saying his theology wasn't good and all. And I'm like, you look like you're probably 25 years old. And, but it's.
I wonder if it's, I think I know the video you're talking about. But a side note, she's actually really solid if it's the one I'm thinking of. But she just put a video out recently that was like talking about how we need to be careful, and every different pastor denomination has leanings.
But you are not going to find one single perfect pastor in the world.
Oh no,
ain't going to happen. And to sit here and spend all your time insulting what's wrong with every pastor. Maybe lift up the fact that they're out there spreading the gospel. Because in my opinion, of all the pastors that I listed, I think Matt Chandler is probably one of the most solid Bible teachers in the country.
Oh, absolutely.
And but you're not going to find a perfect. And if you're looking for a place full of perfect people, you're going to be sadly disappointed going to any church. And so,
right, and we do have to be careful too. There are times and places to call it heresy.
Well,
but that's one thing. A heretic is different than some just maybe shallow guy or something. I don't know, but there is a time and a place to call out certain things. But I don't think the internet is one of them. I think, if there's an issue in your local church, then do what the Bible says, right? You bring two or more together.
Yep.
And you bring that up. And so that's the internet age that we're in is a dangerous one. There's a lot of good, I listen to Matt Chandler's sermons every week on my way to work. And he's absolutely my favorite Bible teacher, but there's, always things that every once in a while you can catch something and be like, well, I don't know. I haven't caught too much of that with him, but yeah. So,
and regardless of where you go to church, regardless of what pastor you listen online, that's the reason why we need to be in the Word, so that we can let God speak to us. And the other thing is, there are passages, and I know you're big on what's style preaching that you always
expository.
Yeah, expository, where you go verse by verse, and a lot of people a lot of times will take.
And Matt Chandler doesn't even do that, so he kind of does, but he's not really.
But he adds in stories.
He's my favorite.
but sometimes people will take verses out of context. But there are, and I'll use a verse for example. 1 Corinthians 6:19 through 20. It says, "For don't you know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, and you are not your own, for you are bought at a price. Therefore, glorify God in your body." Well, if you read that whole entire section, it talks about sexual immorality before that and heaven. But that verse, when it first spoke to me, I was eating garbage. I was drinking way too much alcohol. I was not exercising, and I was about 100 pounds overweight. And so that verse at that time, when I was reading, spoke to me as like, okay, this isn't just about sex. This is about anything I do with my body, and I need to honor God and make it the best it can. So, but if somebody else preached a sermon and used that verse as that, then they were like, well, that's not what it says. But God can speak to you however he wants to speak to you with the word that he wrote. It's his word.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
So, but one thing that stood out to me about what we're talking about, and I think is an example for all of us, is the pastor that invited you to play basketball. And,
yes.
And I love how that church was using something that's
talking smack.
A hobby to get people involved in the church. And we could basketball is one example, but it could be anything. Yeah. And so that's ironically how I got to coming back to church was through rock climbing. Me and my daughter went to the rock climbing gym next door to my business frequently, and there was a pastor, Joe from Manna Church, and he was in there. He kept talking to me, kept inviting me. It was like, dude, just come to church this Sunday. Come on. And needless to say, the rest is history. But I love that, how somebody could take something that is common between both Christians and non-Christians, like basketball, because clearly the NBA has some Christians playing and a whole bunch of non-Christians, but it could be a ministry field.
Oh, yeah.
So,
like me, it was like, okay, I would go to church. That's a small price to pay to go in the league,
Yeah.
But it introduced me. It gave me a base, even if you see someone come to your church through that and eventually leave like I did, know that, that guy planted a seed in me.
Yeah.
And definitely. And it eventually it grew. And, I've been 21 years, ish baptized and really following Christ. And, I go back to that guy being the one that really planted that seed in me. And the outreach work. Yeah.
So. Yeah. You talk about playing basketball. I used to play basketball with the Amish.
Oh, gosh.
You ain't never play basketball until you ball with the Amish because they're built like bricks.
Oh, yeah.
They're extremely athletic. And there's a guy that was like 5'6" maybe, and he could dunk. Homeboy could get elbow to the rim.
Yeah.
He was an Amish kid.
we got a lot of Amish around me. I used to bale hay with them.
Oh, yeah.
And boy, I tell you, they're strong.
You can't keep up with them.
No, you can't.
They look scrawny, but holy moly, I'm around Amish too everywhere. They just started riding electric bikes around me. Apparently that was approved by the bishop or whatever. So they're zipping by my house at 35 mile an hour, and these electric bikes, they go.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
So, but awesome. So tell us about getting into woodworking, scroll saw stuff. How'd you get into that? You always working
Well,
with your hands? What's your backstory there?
Well, as I told Stace about a couple years ago, I feel like I'm on year 30 of my 5-year plan when it comes to woodworking. So I've been doing woodworking a long time. I grew up on a farm, so I was punching nails and a little bit of everything, fences and stuff like that. But I really got into woodworking after I graduated. My grandfather retired from farming, sold his cattle and put his property into the CRP set aside. And he went right to the field into his basement woodshop. And I'd come over and he'd be punching tin on his dining room table for a pie safe he was making. And he was just doing it for fun. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I want to get involved in that. So, one Saturday I came over with some boards and a cup of coffee, and we went down his basement. And, from there, I just, he mentored me quite a bit. Sometimes we're just two guys down there just doing woodworking. And I eventually got some commissions here and there, but mainly I was doing it for fun. And didn't get into too much. When Stacey and I got married, I went into youth coaching, so I wasn't doing as much. But about 2019, Stacey and I started having some conversations about we were heading to the empty nest part of our lives, and she just kind of was outside randomly. It's like, what do you want to do? You're not coaching. The youngest is getting ready to graduate. It's like, I wanted to start a woodworking business. And at the time we moved in a house that had a detached pole barn with enough electricity to run a table saw. And I was like, she's like, all right, go for it. So that's kind of how Almond Creek Woodshop came about. And I kind of got a lot of interests, woodworking wise, from big to small. And for the last 5 years, doing craft shows, doing just selling stuff out of just different places, and not so much online, but doing some commissions for people. But last year, I kind of hit a point where I started asking myself, having a side hustle, what was it? What was the value it was giving me? And wasn't really a great stream of income. I was doing okay, but I just had a lot of different ideas I wanted to follow, like the scroll art. And with the birth of my 2 grandkids, I kind of went in full grandpa mode as a woodworker. I wanted to start building them stuff, and I kind of decided to put the Almond Creek Woodshop as a business on hold. And that's kind of where I started the scroll art. This year I bought a scroll saw and I dove into that. And as Tom will tell you, he was following my stories. It was an adventure, but when my grandfather passed away, I was given all of his woodworking magazines from like the mid 80s to early 2000s. And I got I'm putting them in binders now, and I got 15 binders, but I get all this stuff that I want to build. It's all different. These the old Woodsmith magazines. So that's kind of where Almond Creek Woodshop is right now. And that's kind of my story. It's a long story of it being a hobby. And for the last 5 years, it was a side hustle, but now it's back to being a hobby and just having fun with it. And that scroll art it's fun, it's challenging, and I'm hoping to get more into it. But yeah,
that's pretty cool. Now, do you live on a farm now, or
no? We still have the family farm, but I live in town. So I describe my house as a mullet. It's business in the front, party in the back, because I'm on Main Street, but my backyard's in the country. That's how small of a town I'm in. So,
yeah,
so the backyard, I got that pole barn. I can do whatever woodworking I want in it. And, but even then, like I said, when I was doing this as a side hustle, you guys probably know in your adventure, you get to a certain point where you got to dump some money into it. And I was kind of at that point where I have to put some money into this if I want to go into the next level as a business. And And just like I said, with grandkids being born, with other things I wanted to build, I ended up building like toy boxes this for Christmas. And it's like that really, to me, put in perspective of, I just need to do this for fun, and I need to build stuff for my family and for myself, and just go back to having fun with it. And I got enough stressors in my life to, add a business to it. So. But yeah, so that's
you're doing fantastic with your scroll saw, man.
Yeah, and it's a new adventure. I had scroll saws before, but they've been really cheap. I've got frustrated with them, and we was talking before the podcast. The scroll saw I have now is it's a Sears Craftsman Professional. So at the time, it was probably top of the line scroll saw, and ended up getting that in marketplace, and that really was a game changer on scroll art because it's more powerful and the blades are easy to change out, and that having equipment, it's not a new machine, but having better equipment to do that scroll art, it really comes in handy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
that's awesome. I've never done scroll saw stuff, but I had an opportunity. My brother-in-law, they bought a farm up here in Pennsylvania, and I went down to help move up. I think I talked about it on the podcast a while back last fall, but he had a scroll saw. It was a really nice brand. Was it Pegasus?
Yeah, Pegasus.
I think. And he just wanted to get rid of it.
I think he had an Excalibur.
Excalibur.
Oh,
That's
Excalibur.
That's what it was.
They're really nice too.
Yeah.
He's like, I just want to get rid of this thing. And he's like, you want it? And I'm like, I don't want that thing. But then we looked it up, and we're like, that thing was like, I think new. It was like $2,000 or something.
Mm-hmm. They're expensive.
Like, holy moly.
I paid $50 for mine.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
It was top of line back in the 1990s, maybe, but it's it was a good marketplace find.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes that's the best. I mean, my bandsaw is a old Craftsman with the cast iron top and stuff, and I paid $100 or something for it. But very good. So, Travis, what do you got going on in the shop right now?
So I'm on a couple last year projects. I've made a game table for my daughter, which is kind of coffee table with inset felt opening for like board games and that. And when I built it, I didn't make up a top. They didn't really know if they wanted a top. Well, now they want a top. So the last 6 months I've been trying to get to that. So that's like number one. And I'm doing some furniture restoring. I got a Stacy's grandfather's dining table that I'm going to be refinishing. And so those are the two big things. Those are two last year projects that I'm finally getting to. So
that's fun. How about you, Tom?
Working on my project for Makers for St. Jude. So this skull saw art.
I talked to you on the phone the other day. You got a bunch of rain, so your French drain got, which is funny, your French drain got flooded out.
Dude, we got so much rain. I don't know inch-wise how much, but, man, it was just a muddy mess. Our entire farm was. And the sad thing is that, I'm working on digging this French drain, and then that rain just washed a bunch of dirt. Dude, I had to dig out so much stuff back. That's what I was doing today. It finally dried out enough. I worked out there all day. I'm almost done. I should be putting the rock in tomorrow and then getting
Did you already lay the pipe, or put rock and then lay pipe on top of it?
Yeah, I got to put the rock first. And but yeah, man, you wouldn't believe how much rain we got. It was crazy. So,
wow.
But yeah.
Well, I've done wood stuff, but not woodworking. My brother-in-law, the one that last fall bought the farm up here in Tennessee, which, by the way, you guys are a little bit older than me, no offense. When my in-laws, they bought where they're at now, it's an old farm. When they bought that place, I went to my parents and I'm like, Hannah's parents just bought the farm. And my dad's like, which one of them died? I didn't realize that term, bought the farm, meant that you died. Did you guys ever hear that?
Yeah,
Or is that
I've
just
heard
an
that
older
saying
thing?
before.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I was just like, oh man. Anyways, so he got this farm, and his property has this like ridge on it that follows the road, kind of goes up over this ridge. And the Penelec, which is our telephone or our power company, just put new like poles in, telephone poles in, and they left the old ones. And they said, it's your property. If you want those old ones, you can cut them down and use them. And so he's in the process of putting up a second pasture for horses, because they have like 8 horses and all that stuff. And so he's like, hey, can you come down and help me take these telephone poles and buck them up and put them in I already got the holes dug, and we'll put them in the holes. Y'all, telephone poles are heavy.
Oh yeah.
He's got a big 80 horsepower Kubota tractor. And he's got forks for the front of it. And we couldn't get the tractor where the telephone poles were at. And so cut them up into 8-foot sections, and then we carried them to the forks. And just those 8-foot sections. And the funny part is so telephone poles are tapered.
Yep.
I don't know if anybody ever realized that. They're fatter at the bottom and skinnier at the top. And at the bottom, they got that chemical, that like whatever it is that they're drenched in. And so the bottom parts of them are heavier than the top parts. And so I work in an office. I'm in IT, and so I have the office body, and so I was feeling that. And then he's like, hey, over in the field where we're going to put the pasture, I dropped a bunch of trees. You want to help me go buck these up? Like, yeah, sure. So we did like bucked up 4 trees. And let's just say I could barely walk Sunday morning. But it felt good, though. I mean, it felt good together with a chainsaw. So I have 3 chainsaws, and one of them was given to me. One I bought when we bought our first house, and then the other one I got a little bit nicer one. I was doing more tree stuff. And I've got the one that was given to me is a Stihl Farm Boss, a big, like, you want to cut down that oak tree, we're going to get this chainsaw. And that's what I took with me. Well, after doing the telephone poles, all we had the trees that he dropped were smaller. They were, but the base of the biggest one maybe was 8 or 10 inches. And that Farm Boss is heavy. And so I was like, man, if I'd have known, I'd have brought my smaller one. I've got a Stihl, I don't know what model it is. It's kind of their smaller 16-inch bar. But I was tired, man. I was exhausted. And then I got home and jumped on the mower and mowed the grass because it rained Sunday, and I didn't want to get that done. And I mow a little over 2 acres, I think. And so, yeah. So that's my woodworking, cutting trees.
Yeah, I used to have a 029 Farm Boss, and it was heavy. I finally got rid of it.
I think that's what mine is. It's a 029.
Yeah, it was an older one. I'll tell you what, you get done, sawing with it, your arms are about down to your ankles, and
Yep.
like I only cut about a cord a year, so like this is too big for what I need.
Right.
Ended up getting rid of it, but yeah, they're heavy. That's for sure.
Yeah, my father-in-law gave it to me. My father-in-law is one of those, like, he's close to retirement. He's probably a year or 2 from retirement, and he loves going to auctions. He just loves auctions, and he's that guy. He might listen to this, but love you. He's that guy that will go to an auction and wait, and then he'll make an offer on all the little leftover stuff, and then he'll buy it for like $10 and get a whole truckload of stuff, and then he'll turn around and he'll sell it on Facebook and make a couple $100 off it. He'll just piece out. And so he got find stuff like this. So I think this chainsaw was one that he got in an auction deal. And he's like, hey, he already had a bunch of chainsaws. He's like, the string was broke on. There wasn't any string on it. And so the string was broke on it, and the bar was bent and the chain was bad. And he's like, I think it'll run if you give it some TLC. And sure enough, the thing runs like a top. But I had to put a string on it, a new bar and chain on it, and cleaned it all out and carburetor and everything. And it runs great. But it's just funny. He finds all these deals. He actually just texted all of us this weekend, and he was at another auction Saturday. If he didn't get a whole truckload of stuff. I was like, you realize that's going to be us that's going to have to deal with that when you die someday.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, Travis, man, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. So where can people find you on the Instagram?
So I'll be on Instagram, and I do mainly stories. So you'll catch me on doing quite a few stories. I do have a YouTube. I don't do a whole lot on my YouTube. I only think I got one video this year, but usually I try to do like 4 or 5 videos. So nothing too big on the YouTube. I'm still deciding what to do with the YouTube, but I mainly stay on Instagram because just the community is pretty cool, and I like seeing everybody's stories.
And that's Almond Creek?
Yes, that's Almond Creek Woodshop.
Okay. So where's that name come from?
So my grandfather's first name is Almond. And the creek is actually a county ditch that goes through our property, but there's no name for it, so I called it Almond Creek. So
very cool.
Yeah. But I'm surprised it's taken. As you guys know, the hardest part of having a woodworking business is finding a name that's not taken.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised Almond Creek wasn't. So, but yeah, there's some, personal to that being from my grandfather who taught me woodworking, and so.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Flat Woodworks. We lived on Flatwoods Road.
There you go.
Flat Woodworks. So,
there you go.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your testimony, and we really appreciate it. And good stuff.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So until next week, I'm Will from Flat Woodworks.
I'm Tom from Mountain Valley Maker.